세션을 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 제 1세션은 권총의 문화, 권총성에 관한 논의를 중심으로 진행하고 있는데요. 자장은 영남대학교 영어인문학부 교수로 계시는 이성렬 교수님을 모시도록 하겠습니다. 이성렬 교수님은 사교대 방문이나 글로컬리제이션에 대해서 관심이 많으시고요. 최근에 글로컬리제이션, 시대의 지역적 교육인가, 시대의 대안인가라고 하는 다른 주제로 논문도 쓰시고 있습니다. 그리고 저희 연구단에 해가지고 매번 많은 도움을 주시고도 있습니다. 이성렬 교수님을 모시도록 하겠습니다. 다른 거는 별 부탁드리고 그런 건 없는데요. 진행하는 시간에 점심시간이 필요해 있습니다. 그러니까 점심시간에 잘 맞춰주시기를 드리겠습니다.
예, 안녕하십니까. 영남대학교의 이승렬입니다. 발표하실 분들이 일단 다 앞으로 나오셔야 되는 거 아닌가요? 한 분씩. 예, 알겠습니다. 저 오늘 좌장을 맡으라고 했는데, 사실은 원고 전달을 좀 첨부했고 그래서, 저 원고를 사실 제가 잘 못 읽고 아침에 기차에서 오면서 읽고 그래서 좌장으로서 역할을 제대로 할 수 있을지 잘 모르겠습니다만 어쨌든 좌장의 무엇보다도 중요한 역할은 지금 말씀하신 대로 시간 관리에 있는 것 같습니다. 그래서 점심시간에 차질이 없도록 시간을 잘 하도록 관리를 하도록 해보겠습니다. 오늘 오늘 첫 번째로 발표를 해주실 니할 페레라 교수님은 미국의 폴스테이트 유니버시티의 소속이시고요. 전공은 어번 플래닝, 도시계획 전공자이십니다. PhD를 수니 빙햄튼에서 하셨고요. 공간의 정치학에 대해서 관심이 많으신 걸로 알고 있습니다. 그래서 공간의 정치학을 연구하시면서 이제 그 안에 많은 세계화랄지, 빈곤이랄지, 사회 정의랄지, 문화적 다양성이랄지 이런 많은 문화론적인 주제를 연구하고 계십니다. 오늘 발표를 해주실 논문은 우리말로는 미래를 향한 경쟁, illegibility, 저항, 그리고 다라비의 재개발, 뭄바이 교회 슬럼의 재개발과 관련된 이야기인 것 같습니다. 제가 오늘 아침에 와서 잠깐밖에 못 봤기 때문에 잘은 모르겠습니다만은 그 다라비 안에 실제로 거주하는 그 사람들의 어떤 사회적인 관계 이런 것을 실제 국가를 관리하는 그 관리들이 제대로 이뤄내기가 어려울 것이다. 그래서 그 재개발이 자본의 이해관계에 맞추어서만 제대로 이루어지기는 어려울 것 같다라는 뭔가 그 이민의 입장에서 봤을 때 낙관적인 어떤 전망을 내리고 계신 걸로 보입니다. 오늘 처음에서 말씀 드리겠습니다. 나와주시죠. 시간은 지금부터 30분 발표를 하시는 걸로 하겠습니다.
Well, first of all, thanks for coming. this morning. Thank you very much for the invite, the invitation, to put it in a different way. Especially for Professor Park for recommending me, and then for case I didn't like invite me. Okay. This is the next one. Dharavi is one of the biggest slums on earth. 4 centuries ago, this location was occupied by a small fishing village, a koliwada it's called, on the outskirts of then-Bombay. Due to the extensive growth of the city, Dharavi is due to the extensive growth of the city, Dharavi is currently located near the new business district Bandra Kurla. Dharavi too has changed. The building activity of the new migrants and its expanding population, as well as the slum upgrading projects have changed this. It is currently in the news because there's this huge project called Asia's largest slum development project. The slum, the word slum is indiscriminately used in India by middle classes as a value-free word for low-income settlements. The designation implies that this is unacceptable, basically, at least to the former society. The latest proposal for the redevelopment was made by Mukesh Mehta. He seeks to tear down the old slum and replace it with residential towers, industrial parks, golf courses, etc., replacing the grime with glitter. The numbers reveal its magnitude is we are talking about 600,000 people, 500 acres, 40 million square feet of commercial space, and about $2 billion spent over 7 years. The acceptance of the proposal by the government has spurred substantial debate on the future of Dharavi. The proposal has become so hegemonic that the community too talks about redevelopment. So the paper pretty much examines the proposal, the visions of the major players involved in it, the debate, the political changes in Dharavi, and the possible ways to understand this. If I begin with a larger story like globalization or something like that, I will have to incorporate data details into that narrative, and I will have to transform that. Therefore, instead of doing that, I will focus on the story and see what that really means, how the globality is totally produced in that sense. The acceptance of the proposal by the knowledge and legibility of Dharavi are central to the debate and the potential outcomes. Opponents of the project ask whether there is adequate knowledge of the district to base any interventions. Highlighting who can create knowledge, a reluctant critic of shadow cities asserted that living in Dharavi for a short period does not make someone knowledgeable of it. At the same time, people who have never lived there have become experts, sometimes by virtue of living in India or Mumbai, right, in a national sense. Hence, there is no comprehensive narrative of Dharavi. It is simultaneously a well-known and an unknown place. Most crucially, illegibility serves as the main defense of Dharavi's communities against their transformation by external agents. I'm running this slide so you get much more details, I'm presenting my paper that I can finish in about 30 minutes. While many self-established settlements are mixtures of cultural groups originating from various regions of India, only a few contain the extraordinary mix of Dharavi. The name Dharavi is therefore a culturally and politically strict abstract perception constructed by outsiders, because for them it's much more of a diverse place. Older than Bombay, Dharavi existed when the city comprised of 7 islands around Nihal Perera. The Kolis, fisherfolk are the earliest known inhabitants of the archipelago. The koliwada, certainly there are many, have survived the Hindu colonization, the Muslim rule, Portuguese and British colonizations, and the explosive expansion of Mumbai. Dharavi is much greater, much larger. Dharavi is much larger and complex than its earlier koliwada. Over the last 400 years, it has become central to the city. The economies based on fishing, pottery and textiles have been overlaid by a large recycling industry that processes waste from various parts of Mumbai. Despite its precarious existence deemed illegal, the enterprises and industries have flourished. With an estimated 15,000 single-room factories, nearly two-thirds of the dwellings have family-owned cottage industries. The economic figures are astounding, and its land use distribution is quite lavish, as this slide shows. In the minds of the formal society, Dharavi is simultaneously accepted and rejected. It is tightly enmeshed in social and physical fabrics of the city. This part is It is located between two of Mumbai's main commuter rail lines and two major highways border it. Several public thoroughfares that cut across the locale include the 60-foot road and the 90-foot road, etc., etc. Adjacent to Dharavi is a fast-growing Bandra Kurla, which is actually the business district, and the domestic and international airport. Despite the central location, Dharavi is not legible to the outsider, and most middle-class people do not dare to enter, let alone engage. Unlike the French knowledge of Egypt that Napoleon's men developed as part of the process of conquest, I'm referring to Said here, the authorities have not been able to map out Dharavi, nor has an outside agency been able to develop a convincing narrative to capture it. This lack of knowledge is not limited to the physical environment. In spite of its contribution to its Mumbai's economy through production and recycling, there is no precise data on this or other significant roles it plays in the city. Despite the desire to know the place, no outsider really knows how many people live in it, the kind of tenure they have, or how tenure are organized. This is that Bandra Kurla. This lack in the mainstream knowledge is reversed. Is reversed by associating illegibility with danger. The authorities and middle classes assume that the spatial layout of such settlements and the density it represents results in people literally living one on top of the other, exacerbating social tensions. Such a slum status makes the general populace presume that the site is a breeding ground for criminals and other antisocial elements. Dharavi, however, explodes these myths. For its inhabitants, Dharavi is an organized space, familiar to them. Holy Maidan, the large open ground which provides the main setting for diverse and social activities, dates back to the 18th century. Despite an explosive mixture of different communities that live in crowded surroundings, there have been relatively few incidents of violence between them. Until the 1992 riots, the big riots that many of you may have heard, Dharavi was one place in Mumbai that had not witnessed significant communal clashes. Jane Jacobs is emphatic that the connection between high densities and overcrowding is an obfuscation that we have inherited from garden city planning. Dharavi is an ingenious creation that no formal agency is able to reproduce, a phenomenon that echoes Jacobs' assertion that cities have the capability of providing something to everybody when everybody plays a role in creating them. As James Scott argues, illegibility has been and remains a reliable resource for political autonomy of the powerless, and Dharavi's illegibility to middle classes protects it from the outside world. Therefore, I'm not trying to make it legible. That's not my goal. Mehta, who made the bold proposal, is a self-styled social entrepreneur. He has been championing the idea of transforming Dharavi since his return to India from the United States in 1995, and cites very strong personal attachment to this, about his father's journey, etc., etc. And there's some aspect of American dream there as well. He has actually succeeded in getting the government accept his $3 billion proposal, and also he's been appointed as a consultant. that he proposes, 30 million will go to the residents, which includes residential and other amenities. The other 40 million is for sale. So it's kind of like you can see public-private partnership, but I would call it more like public-civil society partnership. Each family in Dharavi will get a 225 square foot apartment, condominium. The project also includes 5 new roads and it will take 7 years to complete. And Mehta proposes to bring state-of-the-art healthcare and entertainment facilities as well. In this, he alludes to the modernist idea that transforming the built environment can uplift the people, can make them middle class in some ways. The Maharashtra government adopted the project in February 2004, and Mehta was appointed the advisor. As I said, the central government also contributed to the project by announcing a grant of 500 crore rupees allocated towards its infrastructure. Yet the project has been subjected to repeated debate, delay, negotiation, and has changed in the process. Reservation for open space, for example, has increased to 15%, and space for amenities such as schools has doubled to 10%. These changes indicate that it has now become a state project. Moreover, with such increase in public areas and other similar negotiations, it is unlikely that the cross subsidy and the business plan will be fully materialized. Despite the private civil society partnership propagates, the project adopts a developer perspective. Neil Smith makes a compelling argument that capital has redirected its attention and energy into taming America's inner cities. This is about America. Although it is not the rundown historic city center in Mumbai, Dharavi is viewed as underutilized prime real estate near Bandra Kurla, because the new business district is right next to it. As there is no hegemonic narrative, Dharavi cannot be fully transformed unless the national state carries out a ruthless project. There are several historical moments when urban development was driven by utopian plans and authoritarian disregard for values, desires, and objections of the subjects. This includes massive city building projects in Chandigarh and Gandhinagar, etc. So far, the state has not shown such commitment to the redevelopment of Dharavi. While the government envisions a future for Dharavi, its inhabitants have their feet firmly planted in the present. They understand the potential of improvement, but fear displacement. As many residents have built larger houses, they are not certain how 225 square foot at an upper level would improve their lives. Space is a major concern for 10,000 potters who inhabit in 2.5 acres. There's a pottery village, koliwada. We need space to keep the mud, make the parks, and then bake and dry them, stresses Jetwa. Clearly the people's views are broad-ranging, but they do not speak the same language as the plan makers, nor do they have much formal direct means to communicate their ideas. And there comes Jokin. Jokin Arputam has found ways to directly contest the plan and represent slum dwellers. The Magsaysay Award winner and slum dweller is capable of speaking with the authorities and middle classes in their own territory, in their own language. For him, Dharavi is not an empty land to be exploited, but an economically vibrant community full of social capital and self-employment. In addition to the plan, he also questions its operational viability. The lack of operational details make many believe that the plan is either flawed or a scam. The continuous debate against the proposals have made Arputam appreciate selected aspects of redevelopment. Instead of calling to scrap the proposal, he calls for global tenders and careful scrutiny. He combines debates, protests, and discussions to negotiate the direction and components of Dharavi's redevelopment. Invoking the Geneva Convention, he asked for dwellings larger than 300 square feet. He has been vigorously campaigning against investment in this project in several countries abroad. On Politicians provide another layer of protection for Dharavi. Let us briefly explore the others who are engaged in this debate. Design and planning professionals and academics have also joined the debate. The former director of the Progressive TVP School for Habitat Studies, A.G.K. Menon, questions the basic planning values involved in the plan. Here I quote it. Planning is about dealing with people, not money. Yet, Dharavi has a completely capital-driven strategy in which the architect is looking at land as an economic resource and trying to maximize on that. Utpal Sharma, who's on the screen, the dean of the school, the School of Planning at Ahmedabad, engages the technical details of the plan. Approaching from a quantitative standpoint and focusing on the physical, he calls for low-rise, high-density development. Sharma has no objections to redevelopment of Dharavi, but questions the norms. I quote, if the state adopts the original plan, the density will go beyond that of Hong Kong. This is not sustainable, says Sharma. In his proposal, the accommodations are closer to the ground, the buildings have wide outer corridors connected by ramps, or they are on high stilts to provide space for working and community activities. And the current functions are somewhat accommodated. The government is yet to get back with. Additional Chief Secretary in charge of urban development said the government is considering the proposal made by the two schools of architecture. There's another school called KRBA. He said, in quotes, we could also have a mix of both the old plan developed by Mehta and the new. End quote. In this, the government has clearly taken the ownership of the project, but its ability to deliver seems severely limited. In rediscovering Dharavi, journalist Kalpana Sharma highlights its resilience. According to her, Dharavi has been a place of change, from swampland to tannery to slum. She uses the word too. In the process, it has developed into a mature settlement, where infrastructure was once non-existent. Many households now have electricity and indoor water taps. There is also much that has changed, and thousands of people live in untenable conditions in areas that are extremely difficult to operate. One of the central issues is the challenge of creating acceptable living conditions. And rediscovering Dharavi, the book she wrote, traces some of the many schemes that have been undertaken in the past. Other organizations, especially NGOs, have also taken on an active role in this debate to struggle. Sheila Patel, the founder of Spurred, adopts a social justice-based politicized approach. In quotes, it is only when communities of those affected by this development get organized and develop capacity to negotiate what they want that some critical elements to ensure participation emerge in the process. She turns her words into deeds by working with Abdullah and KRBIA, among others. She shares the view that Dharavi needs to be redeveloped, but before that, it needs to be understood and mapped, like in any positivist stance, out in a formal sense. The need to know, Patel, is combined with the political decision that the land in Dharavi belongs to the people. So she's a political economist in that sense, who are the people who live there. The underlying premise is empowerment. The debate opens up room for both people's voices. I have sort of like cut it down, it's in the paper a lot more, and their objectification. The possibilities for the latter range from slum tourism and movies to conservative interventions. The timing of Slumdog Millionaire, many of you know, I'm sure, and it becoming a big hit may be a coincidence. Yet, the interest in commercializing Dharavi has increased both with neoliberalism and the redevelopment project, which are intertwined. The interest has also given rise to slum tourism, which provides different kind of objectification and a story. Additionally, coalists have numerous times defeated municipal redevelopment plans that threaten to erase or substantially transform their habitats. You see this on the screen. This time, the coalists argued that they have been occupying the area long before the government of Maharashtra was established. If they are squatters, then all villages in India are squatters. Profound argument. The community is in possession of many documents providing their claim, including early maps made by the British surveyors. Originally slated to be a part of Sector 5 of the present project, coalists were granted an exemption, and they are in 2007, and they are organizing their own development of that part. Utpal Sharma is optimistic. I'm quoting. Projects get implemented in India, but slowly, he says. In this scenario, Dharavi's landscape and the livelihood will change, but not drastically and not too fast, the way I see it. Hence, the most likely outcome is a partial implementation of the project. This is evident in the current landscape that is largely a sea of single-story, self-built dwellings dotted with clusters of flats. The tall buildings represent intermittent, half-hearted state interventions over a long period of time within the large space created by the inhabitants. So inhabitants have created a large space. You can see some high-rise buildings here and there. These were all kind of like failed redevelopment projects. The proposal is premised on two competing models: the commercial model of Bandra Kurla, the business district, and the people's model of Dharavi, and the superiority of the former. As the state and entrepreneurs attempt to make headway into Dharavi by modernizing and making it legible, Bandra Kurla, which was built on a legible model for middle classes, is fast encroached by the much needed informal activities such as street vending, and is acquiring the characteristics of Dharavi. So Bandra Kurla is becoming a little bit like Dharavi than it used to be. So I'm questioning this idea of the model. As the state and capital try to order and commodify Dharavi, the people are expanding it into Bandra Kurla. The local standards of measurement, as seen in Dharavi, are tied to everyday practice. Formal schemes of order are untenable without some element of practical knowledge that they tend to dismiss. And Dharavi has this practical knowledge. Anirudh Paul, director of KRBIA, the other school that I mentioned, takes a more pragmatic path. He thinks that the government has already decided to kind of like implement this. There's no point in trying to deny that. So instead of kind of like trying to oppose the government, let's work with the government and show the government a better path how to do this. So he believes he says maybe we need to kind of like use this Patrick Davies' concept from the early 20th century, which is called the conservative surgery, to try and convince the government to do that. As for the well-experienced Indian planner Prakash Apte, Dharavi's model of development has its own strengths. He sees in it a unique, vibrant and thriving cottage industry complex. Productive activity takes place in nearly every home, and a unique characteristic is its very close work-place relationship. As a result, Dharavi's economic activity is decentralized, human in scale, home-based, low-tech and labor-intensive. This has created an organic and incrementally developing urban form that is pedestrianized, community-centric and network-based with mixed use. High-density, low-rise streetscapes. Apte is not blind to the shortfalls and believes in providing adequate physical infrastructure. For him, this is a model most planners have been trying to create in cities across the world. But people have created in many places. As Jane Jacobs figured out in Boston, when at the opening of the book, that's what she mentioned. Hence, it should be improved and replicated. That's the inability that the government and the planners have, according to me. So in sum, Dharavi is complex and legible for the outsider. Yet this lack of order and the illegibility is relative. It seems to work well for the inhabitants who continue to build it. It It is a complex, multi-coded space which is continually perceived and reinterpreted by the inhabitants who carry out their everyday activities and cultural practices, creating different spaces and orders of space. Even from a standard land use point of view, it is highly functional, efficient and desirable, yet unacceptable within the planner's perception of a neighborhood. There is no one privileged discourse that can fully penetrate the meaning of space and the spatial order of Dharavi. Arputam represents people, but is caught up in an oppositional discourse, although transforming. Utpal Sharma explores a technically viable solution, and Menon wishes to reassert the larger mission of planning, which is about dealing with people and public good. Patel adds the right to land, which is a right of citizenship. From a storytelling mode, Kalpana Sharma sees the significance of stopping, looking, and listening to the inhabitants. Paul hopes that the state will not destroy Dharavi and promotes conservative surgery. Apte is bold about the significance of Dharavi's development model produced by the people and calls for its replication and with improvements. Besides the model, illegibility is Dharavi's strength. The mobility of the people and the changes they've made to the place have disrupted the middle class and the authorities' attempts to transform it. Like previous slum development projects, this one too will leave its mark, perhaps as a few tall apartment complexes within the larger landscape of Dharavi created by people. And thank you very much.
예, 시간 거의 맞춰주셨습니다. 한 2분 정도 넘으셨습니다. 거의 시간을 맞춰서 고맙습니다. 우리가 지금 이 강연이 이루어지고 있는 부산도 행정교란 재개발도 공사를 할 수 있는 곳으로 알고 있고, 또 우리가 살고 있는 나라 전체가 지금 개발의 부작용을 심각하게 앓고 있는 그런 나라에서 우리가 살고 있습니다만, 페레라 교수님 강연이 그런 데 많은 시사성이 있었다고 생각합니다. 다음은 배은기 교수님 강의 차례가 되겠습니다. 배 교수님은 이 부산대학교 HK 연구 교수로 계십니다. 부산대학교에서 영어영문학 박사학위를 취득하셨고요. 주로 서구 컬처럴 스터디스 그리고 흑인 문화의 연구 관심 분야로 갖고 계십니다. 오늘 발표하실 논문의 제목은 혼종성 그리고 종성으로부터의 도피 그리고 근대 공간 그리고 그 너머 로컬로티 연구의 이해와 관련하여서 지금 영어를 제가 우리말 옮기고 있어서 제대로 번역을 했는지 모르겠습니다. 예, 30분 지금 25분이니까 55분까지 강연해 주시면 고맙겠습니다.
네, 반갑습니다. 제가 2년 전에 그 국제학술대회에 아마 발표를 했었던 것 같은데 그때도 사실은 좀 6월달이 돼가지고 상당히 논문 때문에 바빠가지고 잠을 못 자고 이렇게 발표를 했던 것 같습니다. 그래도 그때는 이렇게 노래도 부르고 이렇게 했습니다. 이번에도 역시 제가 밤샘을 한 하루를 했습니다. 그래가지고 지금 거의 이렇게 제가 이 시기 그 온오프가 계속 반복되고 있습니다. 그래서 조금 말이 좀 헛나오더라도 좀 이해를 해주시기 바랍니다. 2년 전에 제가 이렇게 노래를 불렀던 게 그 메비스 땡퍼스라는 그 미국 그 소울 가수죠. 소울 가수가 그 리샤 이 무브즈라는 노래를 불렀었는데 오늘 주제도 사실은 그런 부분하고 조금 관련이 됩니다. 그래서 결국 그 땅이라는 부분하고 삶이라는 부분, 삶과 연관되는 관계라는 부분, 그것들이 이렇게 밀어내려고 하는 어떤 세력과 같습니다. 실제로 제가 뭐 한 이 연구단에 와가지고 한 5년 동안 거의 그런 관계의 문제에 집중했던 것 같습니다. 계속 그쪽으로 아마 했던 것 같은데, 그런 한편으로 보면 제 스스로가 경계로 다가가기 위한 하나의 노력이었던 것 같기도 합니다. 왜냐하면 제가 사실은 이렇게 공부를 하면서 끊임없이 이렇게 지식을 뭐 이렇게 탐구한다라고 생각하면서 언제든지 이렇게 삶의 현장에 갔을 때, 뭐 제가 살고 있는 곳도 마찬가지고 연구를 위해서 찾아가는 현장에서도 마찬가지였는데, 언제나 현장에서는 억수로 무능하다는 걸 많이 느꼈거든요. 제 스스로가. 이게 도대체 어떤 의미일까라는 부분들을 끊임없이 물어도 저는 그 삶의 현장하고는 좀 떨어져가지고 늘 생각하고 공부를 하고 해왔다는 것이죠. 자, 그래서 나의 무능의 깨달음이라는 것 자체가 어떤 그 사람들의 어떤, 그러니까 그 현장에 있는 사람들은 늘 저어왔다는 거죠. 국가 권력이나 안 그러면 자본 권력이나 모든 어떤 권력에 의해서 밀려나고 쫓겨나고, 그리고 더욱더 비참한 어떤 삶의 환경으로 밀려나가서 그렇게 살아왔다는 것이죠. 그 사람들도 무능하다는 거죠. 그러니까 나의 무능을 깨달음이 동시에 그 사람들의 무능을 깨닫는 알게 되는 그런 과정이었던 것 같습니다. 그래서 제가 이제 연구를 이렇게 쭉 한 5년 동안 이렇게 그 부분에 집중해서 하다 보니까 이것이 우리의 무능이다. 여기서 그 사람들하고 내하고 서로 무능하다, 나약하다, 한 인간 존재로서 나약하다는 부분들을 이렇게 손을 잡을 수 있는 그런 어떤 하나의 어떤 그 관계의 끈이 되지 않겠느냐라는 걸 사실은 요즘 조금